And when the call to work on World of Warcraft came, like, of course, I was like, yeah, dude, sure. Why not? It's the best game that's out right now.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm going to go work on it. And when I saw QA being treated differently and I saw the actual relationship between QA and development was a lot healthier at Blizzard, I felt a lot more fulfilled there and was able to work there much longer and feel like I had a bigger impact on the games that I worked on at Blizzard than I did at Sony, even though some of those Sony games are still closer.
I remember when I worked on Shade of Iran, which was the first boss fight I got to make myself, right? All the abilities, all the planning, all the executions. And I actually got to call up the QA team that was doing testing. I'm like, hey, can you get 10 people together right now, jump on my server, play it? And they did that. And I would go down the stairs. I had to walk down the stairwell and be like, hey, how is this? And they'd be like, well, this doesn't make any sense. And I go upstairs, like, hang on, change like 6 things. I'm like, okay, try it again. And we did, I think, so I didn't know how you were supposed to access for QA time, right? So I just called people and I'm like, can we just do this, right? And so I'd go down there and we would do like 10 play tests and they'd be like, hey, we got to get back to work. I'm like, okay. And then the next week I'd be like, all right, can we do it again? But that fight, because of that steady flow of feedback and the iteration cycles, actually probably was one of the tightest encounters in Karazhan, right? Not in terms of maybe polish, I was still a new developer, but like the balance, the timing, the pacing, it all worked out, right?
Was that Morgan Day you were working with?
It was Morgan and a few others. I'm blanking. I can see all their faces. I want to say Dan. I want to say it was Morgan. It was Dan. It was at least 2 others. There's this guy who always smoked. Oh, Sean Su? Sean
Su's Sean Su's my 100% mentor, god brother, lifelong friend. He sent me like, wow, year cards for my wedding present. Like I love Sean Su to death. He's my absolute favorite person. And he's still at QA at Blizzard and is an absolute champion. Like, absolutely love that guy.
And but that was the thing, right? And then when eventually I had someone come to my office like, hey, you can't just ask QA to do things. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And I look back at it and my next 4 fights sucked. Right? It was like, I was like, I'm like, am I really this bad now? But like, it was like Nether's fight was like, it was a hit or miss fight depending on which race you were. And I was not about me, but it just shows how valuable that feedback flow is for the people who are actually engaging with your content.
Yeah, because they love it. They truly do. Like, that's why they're there, and so they want to. They share that experience, or they try their best to share that experience. But it's a hard path, and there's a lot of resistance on that path because your job is to tell someone else that they're doing their job wrong.
Yeah, or having the tone that you put into that is typically textual, right? It's through a database. It's very clinical, and there's another person on the other side of this. And I've had some comments written by developers on bugs that I wrote that would cut you to the core. Oh yeah.
Like one that sticks through to me to this day was closing this bug out, another tester pretending to be a designer.
Yep.
What? Why would they say that to you?
Because it wasn't my job. It wasn't my job to give him the type of... The bug I wrote wasn't great. And he wasn't far off base in what he was saying. But at the same time, both of us needed to recognize that we were communicating with a human.
Yep.
And so when he writes something like that, like... I remember it 10 years later. Like,
that's a really passive-aggressive way to communicate that idea. He could have said the same idea, but in a way that was a lot more constructive. Like, hey, thanks
honestly,
for your
he could have flagged 50 bugs
with
the same thing. Like,
this isn't the kind of feedback we're looking for. Thank you, but can you please focus on this kind of stuff instead? Just something that's not so mean. That's like cruel.
I know that's the shock. Let's just take the other side of this for a moment. And I know that's unpleasant, right?
Yeah.
But The other guy on the other side of this is looking at a wall of 200 bugs, right? And he's going through them and he's like, which do I have to hit? And there's one in here. It's like, hey, I think it would be better if this was like this, which should have been an email. But a couple of things. QA people weren't supposed to directly email developers, which I didn't even know unless they emailed them first. Weird unless you like leads or something.
No, do
right?
not.
Remember? And I remember that you couldn't even instant message someone on a development team if you were in customer service or QA unless it was pre-approved, which is blew my mind because I could just message
from
people.
Customer service just up to QA. They had to go through approval too, and I'm like, man, that's our best resource.
Yeah, so it's like, hey,
that's my best resource for bugs. Like for my team, is the people talking to the customers.
But just to give the other side, right? You're looking at a wall of 200 bugs, and you're just like, which ones do I have to deal with? And I have to reassign them. I have to figure out what's there. And sometimes it's just like, they're human beings too, right? You have frustrated, tired, exhausted human beings on both sides of this formula.
Exactly.
So could they have written something better? Yes, absolutely. Did they just get frustrated because they had 30 bugs that were just like that, right? Totally. And that was because the communication pipelines weren't for humans, right? They weren't set up in a way that like, hey, here are some suggestions for you to review. Eventually they did have that suggestion section, but then you had to decide, is this a developer who's going to read through their suggestions or just close them all out at the end of the quarter, right?
Exactly.
It's hard.
Yeah, like how as a developer can you truly prioritize that? Like you are hired for your job because of your talents and skills in this specific field.
Yeah.
A tester is not. A tester is hired for their ability to break or manipulate those systems. However, through time and experience,
they accumulate
testers
skill.
do gain a lot of knowledge on those systems. So they become a really great resource for the developers to use, but testers can and will and do also overstep their boundaries and in their path towards becoming something else, because not a lot of people sit down and say like, I'm QA for life, because they don't make, like, Blizzard tries and is trying to make it a real career path. But not a lot of the other companies have said like, let's make her QA
a full track career path
that's respectable.
Yep.
Because the room for automation, the room for developing good QA and making games that just work, it's not an unknown science. It's regimented, it's strict checklist development and integrated teams, right? And Riot does it. The reason Riot does it so well is because a lot of their producers used to be Blizzard QA.
Damn straight. And
right.
Yeah, and it shows, right, that they brought these lessons like, hey, we want to make things better here, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing, like, also, if you like that, please click here for the full unedited episode. And don't forget to share, subscribe, like, and hit that bell icon.